My parents launched a GoFundMe the same day my brother died and then bled our town dry, so I exposed them and made sure everyone knew exactly what they had done. In just 48 hours, my parents made $45,000 from my brother's death. I was sitting in the bleachers at a basketball game trying to finish my chemistry homework when I saw it happen. Coach Miller was on the court pumping my brother Archie's chest, his voice loud as he counted the compressions, but Archie didn't survive due to an undiagnosed heart condition, as the doctors later said. That night, I walked into my parents' bedroom expecting to find my mother shattered just like me, picturing her clutching Archie's baby pictures and lost in grief. Instead, she was on her laptop setting up a GoFundMe page with a goal set at $10,000. Before 2 days had passed, the total had hit $45,000, and you would think they'd have shut it down then. But grief is a strange thing, or maybe it just peels back the layers to show you who people truly were all along. Instead of closing the fundraiser, my mom updated the description to say they were overwhelmed by grief and unexpected bills. Dad became obsessed with the donation page, his thumb aggressively refreshing the screen every few minutes. I told myself they were just distracting themselves and that the reality of it all would eventually crash down on them. But 3 days after the funeral, my mom ordered me to delete every happy photo on my social media that was taken before Archie died, saying it was disrespectful to his memory. By the second month, they launched another fundraiser for grief counseling, though I never saw either of them attend a single session. That was when everything started to shift. We had been living in a cramped, 2-bedroom apartment with a persistent mold problem on the walls, but suddenly my parents came home one evening celebrating because they had just bought a house. It was in a much nicer, clean neighborhood with 3 bedrooms. Deep down, I knew what they were doing was fundamentally wrong, but the grief was a physical weight so heavy that I couldn't focus on anything else for more than 10 minutes without completely breaking down. None of my friends wanted to hear about it anymore, so I did something truly insane and tried to talk to my family. We were eating chicken Caesar salad for dinner when I brought him up, asking, "Remember when Archie used to steal all my croutons?" Trying to find a flicker of the family we used to be. My mom snapped, "You need to let go of what you can't control," and slammed her wine glass on the table. Archie is taking care of us now. That's all that matters. Think of it as his final gift. Her voice was so sharp and certain that it cut right through me, making me believe she was right and I was the one who was wrong. So, I smiled for every fundraiser photo they staged and followed my mom's lead at every charity gala, playing the part of the bereaved sister. I saved all my grief for my 2 a.m. showers, where it was the only place I felt free to curl into a ball on the tiled floor and let myself cry until I was empty. Sometimes, to feel a sliver of comfort, I'd practice the secret handshake Archie and I had made up, my hands moving in the dark, which always made me smile. Then came the day I finally broke, March 1st, the date of our tradition. Archie and I would bike 10 miles to our favorite homemade ice cream parlor and eat it by the ocean. It was a small thing, but it was ours and it mattered to me. This year, it landed on the same day as my parents' big spring fundraiser gala, and I figured I could do both without it being a big deal. When I brought it up, my mom's face turned a blotchy red and she shouted, "You'd rather play in the dirt than support your own family?" She was already zipped into her new black dress, and though the price tag was tucked in, I'd seen it earlier and it was $400. My dad added, "The Richardsons donated $10,000 specifically to meet you," his voice leaving no room for argument, making it clear I had no choice. But for the first time since Archie died, something inside me didn't just crack, it shattered. "Archie would hate what you've become," I said, my voice trembling. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. My mom didn't say a word but just walked toward me, snatched my phone from my hand, and hurled it against the wall where it hit with a sickening crunch. "If you won't honor your brother properly," she said, handing the shattered device back to me, "then you don't deserve these memories." 2 years of photos, videos, and messages were gone with one throw. The grief washed over me all over again, as raw and shocking as the moment I first heard he was gone. I collapsed onto the hardwood floor, my legs unable to hold me, while they just turned off the lights and went to bed. Eventually, I pulled myself up, my body aching, and started toward the shower, but on the way, I stopped outside the hall closet. It was filled with trash bags of old things we hadn't unpacked, including all of Archie's belongings. For the first time since we'd moved, I pulled the door open and his scent of laundry detergent and boyish sweat hit me first, making my eyes instantly fill with tears. Sitting right on top of a bag of his clothes was a pharmacy receipt. I grabbed it and used the family iPad to Google the prescription, which was for Adderall at the highest possible dose, purchased the day before Archie died. Under normal circumstances, this might have been fine, except no one in our family had ADHD. The more I researched, the more Archie's death began to make a terrifying kind of sense, as the drug was known to cause heart attacks in athletes and why blood ran cold and my hands trembled as I stared at the iPad screen, the pharmacy receipt crinkling in my fist. I scrolled through article after article linking Adderall to sudden cardiac death in young athletes, and every word twisted my stomach into a tighter knot. Archie didn't have ADHD, none of us did. A floorboard creaked upstairs, my parents were awake. I shoved the receipt deep into my pocket and quietly, pushed Archie's closet door shut. The iPad screen went dark just as my mom appeared at the top of the stairs, her silk nightgown flowing around her like a ghostly shadow. She squinted, her eyes adjusting to the darkness of the hallway, and her gaze narrowed when she saw where I was standing because the closet door hadn't fully latched. I quickly grabbed a box of tissues from the hallway table and held it up, forcing my voice to remain steady, my stuffy nose from crying helping to sell the lie. Mom's gaze flicked from my face to the closet door and back to me again, and she stood there for what felt like an eternity. Finally, without a word, she turned and disappeared back into her bedroom. I waited until I heard their door click shut before I let out the breath I was holding, the tissue box shaking in my hands as I made my way back to my room. Sleep was impossible that night as I lay in bed, replaying every moment from Archie's final weeks, desperately searching for the signs I had missed. The next morning, Mom was humming while she scrambled eggs, already showered and perfectly styled in a pair of designer jeans she'd bought last week. Dad sat at the kitchen table scrolling through his phone, checking the donation numbers again, I assumed. I slid into my chair and reached for the orange juice as Mom placed a plate in front of me with the same practiced, gentle smile she reserved for donors. She mentioned it so casually, as if she were talking about the weather. I'm going to donate Archie's things to charity today. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. She was watching me, studying my reaction like a scientist observing an experiment. I forced myself to take a bite of the eggs, which tasted like ash. Mom's smile widened when I didn't protest, and she turned back to the stove, but I could see her reflection in the microwave door, still watching me. After breakfast, I grabbed my backpack and headed for the door, and Mom called out that she'd be at the country club for a donor lunch and that Dad would be joining her, meaning they'd be gone for at least 2 hours. The walk to CVS took 15 minutes, and I chose the one 3 blocks from school, not the one closest to our house, where there was less chance of running into anyone we knew. The automatic doors whooshed open and I stepped into the harsh fluorescent light, wandering the aisles slowly and pretending to browse shampoo bottles while I was actually studying the pharmacy area. There were security cameras in 2 corners, and the pharmacy counter had a clear view of the consultation window, with shelves of white bottles stretching to the ceiling behind it. The pharmacy tech organizing prescriptions looked familiar, and when she turned, I recognized her instantly as Jake's older sister, who had graduated 2 years ago. She caught me staring and gave a small wave, so I waved back and quickly moved to the candy aisle. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom, asking if I needed anything from the store. I typed back that I was fine, then deleted the message and retyped it with a heart emoji because she liked it when I used those. Jake's sister appeared at the end of my aisle restocking cough drops and glanced around before leaning closer. Her voice was barely a whisper as she said, "Weird stuff happens at this pharmacy sometimes. Prescriptions that don't match medical records. Pills that go missing." She'd only been working there for 6 months but had already seen enough to make her suspicious. Before I could ask more, her manager called her back to the counter, and she gave me a long, meaningful look before walking away. I bought a pack of gum and left, my mind racing. Back home, Mom and Dad's cars were gone, so this was my window. Their bedroom door was locked, but Archie and I used to play spies, and I'd learned how to pick simple locks years ago with a bobby pin from my hair. Inside, everything was pristine, with Mom's jewelry box on her dresser next to Dad's collection of cologne, and their walk-in closet overflowing with new clothes. I started with the dresser drawers and nightstands but found nothing but books and phone chargers. Under the bed, there was only dust bunnies. I was about to give up when I noticed that the cover on the heating vent was slightly crooked. My fingers fumbled with the screws, and behind the metal grate, wedged between 2 pipes, was a manila folder. My hands shook as I pulled it out, Archie's name written on the tab in Mom's neat, perfect handwriting. Inside were medical records I had never seen before, including an anxiety diagnosis dated 1 month before he died and prescription records for various medications from different doctors at 3 different clinics across 2 counties. Mom's handwritten notes were clipped to several pages, and one prescription supposedly for vitamins had a note in the margin, anxiety supplements. Increases needed. The vitamins were Adderall, with different doses from different doctors, all prescribed within the same 2-week period. My vision blurred as I used my new phone to photograph every single page. A car door slammed outside and Dad's BMW was pulling into the driveway 2 hours early. I shoved the folder back behind the vent and twisted the screws frantically as they were walking up the front path. The last screw went in just as I heard keys jangling at the front door, so I sprinted to the adjoining bathroom and locked myself in, turning on the shower to create cover noise. Through the door, I heard Dad's voice, clear and suspicious. "The closet door was open when we left," he said to Mom, "and my phone location app shows she was in our bedroom." They were tracking me. Mom's heels clicked down the hallway and she knocked on the bathroom door, asking, "Are you okay, sweetie?" I called back that I felt sick and that it was probably something I ate. She paused, then said to let her know if I needed anything before her footsteps faded away. I sat on the cold bathroom floor, still fully dressed, while the shower ran. The photos on my phone were evidence, but of what, exactly? That my parents had been doctor shopping for Adderall prescriptions and feeding them to Archie, passing them off as vitamins? The pieces were falling into place, but I needed more. Archie's fitness app, he had been obsessed with tracking his workouts and heart rate. If he had been taking Adderall, the app would show the changes in his vitals. I still remembered his password, our birthday combined with his jersey number, but I would need privacy to check it, and now I knew they were monitoring my phone's location, watching every move I made. My phone buzzed with a text from Mia, my best friend since 3rd grade, and her message made my blood run cold. My parents had called her mom and told her they were concerned about my troubling behavior and wanted to make sure I wasn't spreading harmful delusions about Archie's death. The shower water was getting cold, so I turned it off and changed into pajamas to sell the sick story. When I finally emerged, Mom was waiting in the hallway with a cup of tea and that same donor-ready smile. She handed me the tea and smoothed my hair back from my forehead, her hand cool as she checked for a fever, her touch feeling like ice. As she fussed over me, I saw Dad in their bedroom carefully adjusting the heating vent cover I barely managed to screw back into place. They knew, they both knew. But they didn't know that the photos had automatically backed up to my Google account, or about Jake's sister at the pharmacy, or that Aunt Linda, Mom's own sister who had been avoiding family gatherings since Archie died, had pulled me aside at the funeral and whispered, "Something isn't right here." I sipped the tea and thanked Mom for taking care of me, letting them think they were winning and that their tracking and monitoring had me trapped. Because tomorrow, at school, I would use the library computers to reach out to Sarah, Archie's girlfriend, who had been asking questions about that morning, and I would talk to Jake about what Archie had told him. I would build my case, piece by piece, ally by ally. They had turned my brother's death into a business, fed him pills that stopped his heart, and then profited from the grief, but they had made one critical mistake: they had left me alive to figure it out. The next morning brought a new, chilling development when Mom announced over breakfast that she had arranged for me to switch to online schooling. "For your mental health," she explained, spreading butter on her toast with a practiced calm, and Dad nodded along, mentioning how the principal agreed it would be the best course of action after yesterday's incident, even though I hadn't even been to school yesterday. The lie hung in the air between us like a loaded weapon. I pushed scrambled eggs around my plate and said, "Okay, I think that might help." Mom's shoulders relaxed almost imperceptibly as she had been expecting a fight, but instead, I gave her exactly what she wanted: compliance. Let her think she'd won this round. After they left for another donor meeting, I slipped out the back door because the school library computers were my only hope for privacy now. I had memorized the bus schedule the night before, planning each step while they slept. At school, I signed in as a visitor, claiming I needed to return library books, and the secretary barely glanced up from her computer. In the computer lab, I logged into Archie's fitness app and his data loaded with agonizing slowness, each second stretching into an eternity. The heart rate patterns made my stomach drop because for months, his readings were normal, but then suddenly, about 6 weeks before he died, they began to spike. His resting heart rate jumped from 65 to 95 and his workout sessions showed dangerous peaks of 180 and higher. There were notes in the app, too, where he'd mentioned feeling dizzy, having chest tightness, and trouble sleeping. I screenshotted everything and emailed the copies to 3 different backup accounts I had created. Then, I searched for Sarah's contact information in the school directory, memorizing her address before clearing the browser history. A movement in the hallway caught my eye and it was Mom standing at the library entrance, her eyes scanning the room. I ducked behind a bookshelf, my heart pounding against my ribs, as she spoke with the librarian, who pointed toward the computer area. I slipped out through the library's back exit while Mom's back was turned. The walk to Sarah's house took 40 minutes, and I kept to the side streets, avoiding the main roads where Mom might drive past. Sarah answered the door, still in her soccer uniform, her eyes widening in surprise when she saw me. We sat on her back porch while I explained everything: the prescriptions, the fitness app data, and the way Mom had been watching me. Sarah listened without interrupting, her face growing paler with each detail. When I finished, she pulled out her phone and showed me a folder of saved text messages from Archie that documented everything. He complained about the vitamins making him feel jittery and weird, and wrote about Mom threatening to pull him from the travel team if he didn't take them, with Dad backing her up, saying it was for his anxiety. One message, sent the night before he died, simply read, "I can't do this anymore. My chest hurts all the time." Sarah had kept quiet out of respect for my family's grief, but she had been carrying this terrible weight for months, wondering if she could have done something to save him. We hugged on her porch, both of us crying for the boy we had lost and for the awful truth we had uncovered. Her mom found us there 20 minutes later, a woman who had always been kind to me, bringing orange slices to Archie's games and cheering louder than anyone. She took one look at our tear-streaked faces and invited me inside. Over cups of green tea, I told the story again, and Sarah's mom listened carefully, occasionally exchanging glances with her daughter. When I showed her the photos of the prescriptions, her jaw tightened because she worked as a nurse at the local hospital and recognized the dosages immediately. She made a few calls while Sarah and I sat in tense silence, and 20 minutes later, she confirmed what we suspected: the prescribed doses would have been dangerous for anyone, but especially for an athlete with Archie's intense training schedule, making the combination of stimulants and extreme physical activity a recipe for disaster. Sarah's mom offered to let me stay with them, but I knew that would only escalate things with my parents. Instead, she gave me her cell number and made me promise to call if I ever felt unsafe, also mentioning that several other parents had been asking questions about the fundraisers. I walked home slowly, my mind trying to process everything. The house was empty when I arrived, but evidence of Mom's search was everywhere as my room had been ransacked, with drawers pulled out and belongings scattered across the floor. Even my mattress was askew, as if she had been looking for hidden evidence. I straightened everything methodically, making mental notes of what had been touched, noticing my old laptop was missing along with several notebooks, and she had even taken my yearbook, probably looking for notes or messages from Archie. The home phone rang and it was Mia, her voice strained when I answered. Her mom had forbidden her from talking to me, but she had snuck a call from her bathroom. My parents had visited her house again, this time with printouts of what they called my concerning behavior, painting me as delusional with grief and possibly even dangerous to myself and others. Mia didn't believe them, but her mom did, as she had been friends with my mom since their book club days and couldn't imagine her being capable of what I was suggesting. Mia promised to keep gathering information at school, but we would have to be careful about how we contacted each other. I hung up, feeling more isolated than ever, as Mom had been busy poisoning the well, turning potential allies against me before I could even reach them. But she had made one mistake: she had focused on the parents, not the kids. That evening, dinner was a performance where Mom chatted about redecorating Archie's room, suggesting they could turn it into a home office, while Dad mentioned meeting with a financial advisor about setting up a scholarship fund. They were already spending money they hadn't yet raised. I nodded along, even suggesting they use Archie's favorite color for the walls. Mom's eyes narrowed slightly, suspicious of my sudden cooperation, but I kept my expression neutral, playing the part of the grieving but healing daughter. After dinner, I helped clear the table without being asked, and while I was loading the dishwasher, I heard them whispering in the living room. Dad was worried I was planning something, but Mom assured him that the online schooling would keep me contained. I retreated to my room early, claiming I was exhausted, and through my door, I heard Mom on the phone with someone, mentioning that the situation was under control and that the spring gala would proceed as planned, promising the donations will be bigger than ever. I lay in bed, fully clothed, waiting. Around midnight, I heard their bedroom door close and gave it another hour before creeping to the bathroom. Hidden behind the toilet tank, wrapped in a plastic bag, was the burner phone Sarah's mom had slipped me during our hug goodbye. The phone already had several messages. Jake had reached out through Sarah wanting to talk, and 2 other teammates had stories about Archie's strange behavior in those final weeks. Coach Miller had been asking about me. The network was forming, despite Mom's efforts to isolate me. I typed careful responses, arranging to meet Jake at the park during my parents' donor lunch tomorrow, and his message back was immediate. Archie had confided in him about the pills and had even shown him the bottle once. Jake had told him to talk to Coach Miller, but Archie was too scared of disappointing our parents. A soft knock on the bathroom door made me freeze. It was Dad. "You okay in there?" he asked. I flushed the toilet and hid the phone before opening the door. He stood there in his pajamas, looking older than I remembered, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes. He asked if I needed anything, and I just shook my head, noting how he avoided making direct eye contact. As he turned to leave, he paused, his mouth opening as if he wanted to say something, then it closed again, and he shuffled back to their bedroom without another word. Sleep came in fragments, and I dreamed of Archie running on the basketball court, his heart beating visibly through his jersey, each thump louder than the last, until it stopped completely. I woke up gasping, my pillow soaked with tears. Morning brought new challenges when Mom announced she'd be working from home to keep me company during my online school. She set up her laptop at the kitchen table, positioning herself with a clear view of my workspace, where every website I visited would be visible to her. I complied without complaint, logging into the school portal and beginning my assignments. But while she took calls with donors, I used the reflection in my laptop screen to watch her as she was monitoring my browser history on her phone, frowning when she saw I was only on educational sites. During her bathroom break, I quickly opened a private browser and sent a coded message through the school portal to Sarah, which looked like a question about a homework assignment but contained the meeting coordinates for that afternoon. The response came back disguised as study notes. Lunch was tense as Mom had made Archie's favorite sandwich, watching my reaction as she placed it in front of me. I ate mechanically, mentioning how nice it was to have his favorite foods around, and her smile was as sharp as glass. She excused herself for a video call with some major donors, and I could hear her from the home office, spinning tales of our family's tragedy and resilience, mentioning my struggles with grief and how the community's support was helping us heal. Every word was calculated to maximize sympathy and donations. While she was performing, I slipped outside to take out the trash, and Jake was waiting by the recycling bins, having cut class to meet me. We had maybe 5 minutes before Mom would notice I was gone. He handed me a plastic bottle, the same kind Archie had shown him, with the label partially scratched off, but I could make out enough to confirm it matched the prescription I had found. Jake explained that Archie had been taking 2 or 3 before each practice, and sometimes more before games, and the day Archie died, Jake had seen him take 4 pills at once. He'd seemed agitated, complaining about the pressure from Mom to perform well because scouts were watching, and his hands had been shaking so badly he could barely tie his shoes. Jake's voice cracked as he admitted he should have told someone, but Archie had begged him not to because he was terrified of losing basketball, the only thing that made him happy anymore. I hugged Jake quickly, telling him it wasn't his fault, that we were all just kids trying to protect each other from the adults who should have been protecting us. The door slammed inside the house, so I shoved the bottle into my pocket and rushed back inside just as Jake disappeared around the corner. Mom stood in the kitchen, her arms crossed, saying she'd been looking for me and that the trash didn't take that long. I apologized, saying I just needed some fresh air. She studied my face, searching for any sign of deception, but found only the bone-deep exhaustion that had become my constant companion. She returned to her office, but I caught her checking the window locks afterward. That afternoon dragged on endlessly as I completed my assignments while Mom fielded calls about the gala, promising exclusive access to our family's story and chances to hear directly from Archie's grieving sister. I was being packaged and sold, just like his memory. Around 3 p.m., she left for an in-person meeting with the venue coordinator, reminding me that Dad would be home soon and that I should start dinner. The moment her car disappeared down the street, I was moving, grabbing the hidden phone and calling Aunt Linda. She answered on the first ring, her voice tight with worry, saying she'd been trying to reach me for days but Mom had blocked her number. I gave her the short version of everything I had discovered, and Aunt Linda's silence on the other end of the line stretched on for so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Then, she told me something that changed everything. This wasn't the first time. When they were young, Mom had done something similar with their cousin who had epilepsy, convincing the family that experimental treatments were needed and raising money from relatives, but the cousin's condition had only worsened. The cousin survived, but barely, and the family had covered it up, too ashamed to admit they'd been fooled. Aunt Linda had been young then but remembered Mom's calculating eyes as she counted the donations, and she had been waiting for something like this to happen again. She offered to come and get me immediately, but but I knew that would only give Mom more ammunition to use against me. Instead, we made a plan for Aunt Linda to start reaching out to other family members, particularly those who remembered the incident with a cousin, and to contact some of Mom's former employers who'd had suspicions about missing funds in the past. I heard Dad's car in the driveway and quickly ended the call. By the time he walked in, I was chopping vegetables for dinner, the very picture of domestic normalcy. He seemed relieved to find me cooking and even ruffled my hair like he used to when I was little. Over dinner prep, he talked about his day at work, carefully avoiding any mention of Archie or the fundraisers, and I played along, asking about his projects and laughing at his terrible jokes. For a moment, it felt like it used to, but then Mom came home, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. She interrogated Dad about his day while her eyes scanned the house for anything out of place. Finding nothing, she joined us for dinner, dominating the conversation with plans for the gala, and I volunteered to help with the decorations, earning a surprised look from both of my parents. That night, I heard them arguing in hushed tones. Dad thought my cooperation was a sign of genuine healing, but Mom insisted it was manipulation, hissing, "I know her better than that. She's planning something." Dad's weak protests were quickly shut down, and as always, Mom won. I spent the next morning in my online classes while Mom worked beside me, but during lunch, she made a crucial error by leaving her laptop open while she took a call in the other room. I could see her email inbox, full of correspondence about the gala, and one subject line made my blood freeze: increasing supplements urgent. The sender was someone named Dr. Marcus, and though I couldn't read the full email, I memorized the name and the date as another piece of evidence for my growing collection. Mom returned to find me exactly where she'd left me, eating a sandwich and reading my history assignments, but her paranoia was growing. She started checking on me every few minutes, even following me to the bathroom once. The pressure was building, and I knew something was going to explode. That afternoon brought an unexpected ally when Coach Miller showed up at our door, ignoring Mom's attempts to turn him away. He insisted on checking on me, his voice carrying enough authority that even Mom couldn't refuse him entirely. She hovered nearby as Coach Miller asked about my well-being, and I gave the appropriate, rehearsed responses while he studied my face. Then, he mentioned that the team was retiring Archie's jersey number, and the ceremony would be next week, hoping our whole family would be able to attend. Mom's face went through a series of expressions before settling on one of grateful sadness, saying, "Of course, we'll be there." It's such a thoughtful gesture. Coach Miller nodded, but his eyes never left mine. He was giving me a public opportunity, a chance to be seen outside of Mom's control. After he left, Mom was agitated and made several phone calls, her voice sharp with barely contained anger. The ceremony would interfere with her gala preparations, but refusing to attend would look suspicious, trapping her by her own performance of grief. I used her distraction to text Sarah on the burner phone, telling her the jersey retirement ceremony would be our chance to gather our allies, and Sarah immediately started coordinating with Jake and the others. We would have one shot to break through Mom's carefully constructed narrative. The next few days blurred together as Mom tightened her control, even sleeping in a chair outside my bedroom door one night, but her intense focus on containing me meant she was missing the other threats that were closing in. Aunt Linda was quietly building a case against her, Sarah's mom was documenting the dangerous prescriptions, and Coach Miller was asking questions around the community. 3 nights before the gala, everything accelerated when I woke up to the sound of shouting downstairs. Mom had discovered that several of the major donors were pulling out of the gala because someone had been calling them, sharing concerns about the fundraiser's legitimacy. She blamed me, of course, but I had been under her watch constantly. Dad tried to calm her down, but she was beyond reason, throwing a wine glass against the wall and screaming about ungrateful children and ruined plans. I stayed in my room, listening to her spiral. This was the real Mom, the one she had hidden behind a mask of grief and designer clothes. The next morning, she was composed again, but something had shifted. She announced that we were going on a family trip after the gala, just the 3 of us, to heal together. Dad looked uncomfortable but didn't argue. I recognized the trap immediately. She was planning to run with the money, so I had to accelerate my timeline. During her shower, I used Dad's phone to call Aunt Linda, who had made progress but needed more time. I told her about the trip plans, and she promised she would have everything ready before the gala. Mom emerged from her shower to find me reading on the couch, studying me like a specimen under a microscope, looking for cracks in my facade. Finding none, she announced that we would be shopping for our gala dresses that afternoon, calling it a mother-daughter bonding experience. The shopping trip was surreal as Mom chatted with the salespeople about our tragedy while I tried on expensive dresses. She selected a black one for me, saying it was appropriate for mourning, but she chose a bright, garish red for herself. The grieving mother, it seemed, had mourned long enough. That evening, she modeled her dress for Dad, who complimented her while avoiding my eyes. I wondered if he truly didn't see what she was doing or if he was just too weak to stop it, but either way, he was complicit in his silence. I excused myself early, claiming a headache, and in my room, I updated Sarah and the others on the burner phone. The jersey ceremony was in 2 days, and everything had to be perfect because we would only get one chance to expose the truth. Mom knocked on my door an hour later, entering without waiting for permission. She sat on the edge of my bed, smoothing my hair with her cold fingers, and spoke about how proud Archie would be of our strength and how the scholarship fund would help so many young athletes. I agreed with her, even suggesting we name it after his favorite basketball move, and her smile was almost genuine. For a fleeting moment, I saw the mother she could have been if greed hadn't poisoned her heart. Then she mentioned the trip again, how it would be good to get away from all the painful memories, and left me with a kiss on the forehead, her lipstick leaving a waxy mark that I immediately wiped away. Through my window, I watched her shadow pass by my door every half hour, checking on me and making sure I stayed put, but she didn't know about the phone hidden behind the toilet tank or about the allies who were gathering in the darkness. The morning of the Jersey retirement ceremony arrived with threatening gray clouds overhead. I dressed carefully in Archie's old team hoodie, one of the few things Mom had somehow missed during her purges of his belongings. She frowned when she saw it but couldn't object without breaking character in front of the crowd that was already gathering. The gymnasium was filled with teammates, parents, and community members, and Mom positioned us in the front row, her hand gripping my shoulder like a vice, while Dad sat on my other side, fidgeting with his phone. I spotted Sarah near the back with her mother, and Jake stood with the team, his eyes finding mine across the room. Coach Miller took the microphone and began speaking about Archie's dedication, his spirit, and his love for the game. Mom's grip tightened with each word, and when the coach mentioned how Archie had been struggling in his final weeks and how the team wished they had done more to help, her nails dug into my skin. The ceremony proceeded with teammates sharing memories, each story painting a picture that Mom couldn't control, Archie exhausted at practice, his hands shaking during free throws, and him complaining about headaches. The narrative was shifting without anyone directly accusing her. When they unveiled his jersey, number 23, in a glass case, I stood up without warning. Mom tried to pull me back down, but I was already moving toward Coach Miller, who handed me the microphone without hesitation, as if we had planned it all along. I spoke about my brother, not the sanitized version Mom had been selling, but the real Archie. I talked about how he loved to steal my croutons, how we had a secret handshake, and how scared he had been in those final weeks, even though he tried to hide it. My voice stayed steady, even as tears rolled down my cheeks, and the gymnasium was silent, except for a few sniffles from the crowd. I mentioned how much Archie had wanted to make everyone proud and how he had pushed himself beyond his limits, saying, "Sometimes the people who love us can hurt us without meaning to, or maybe while meaning to," my eyes finding my mother's in the crowd. Mom stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor, but at that moment, Aunt Linda appeared from the side entrance, flanked by two of Mom's former coworkers, and they took seats directly behind my parents, their presence a clear message. I finished by saying that Archie deserved to be remembered for who he was, not for what his death could profit, then I returned the microphone and walked back to my seat. The applause started slowly, led by Jake and the team, and then spread through the crowd until it thundered off the gymnasium walls. Mom's face had gone pale beneath her makeup, and she whispered something to Dad, who just shook his head, not immediately following her lead for the first time. The ceremony concluded with a moment of silence, during which I felt the weight of dozens of eyes on our family. Afterward, people approached me instead of my parents, sharing their own concerns and things they had noticed but hadn't wanted to voice. Coach Miller stood nearby like a guardian, preventing Mom from intervening, while Sarah's mom invited several of the parents to coffee to discuss community support for young athletes. We drove home in a suffocating silence, Mom's knuckles white on the steering wheel and Dad staring out the window. I sat in the back, feeling the burner phone buzz with messages of support. The tide had turned, and Mom knew it. At home, she exploded, the accusations flying that I had ruined everything, destroyed Archie's memory, and turned people against our family. Dad tried to calm her down, but she rounded on him, screaming about his weakness and his failure to control me. I retreated to my room as they fought, louder than I had ever heard them fight before, and through my door, I heard Dad's voice rise for the first time, telling her to stop, that maybe I was right, and that maybe they needed to think about what they had done. A door slammed, a car engine started, and Mom was gone. Dad knocked on my door an hour later, looking broken and older than his years. He sat on my bed and tried to explain how Mom had convinced him the supplements would help with Archie's anxiety, how the money had seemed like a silver lining to their tragedy, and how he had been too weak to question her. I let him talk without responding. His confessions didn't absolve him, but they filled in the gaps. Mom had been planning this for months before Archie died, researching his training schedule, calculating the dosages, and she had known about the heart rhythm abnormality from a childhood physical. She had known exactly what she was doing. He left my room carrying the full weight of his complicity, and I heard him on the phone with Aunt Linda, his voice cracking as he admitted truths he had been hiding even from himself. The gala was tomorrow, but the foundation was already crumbling. That night, I couldn't sleep as Mom hadn't returned and Dad had fallen asleep on the couch, surrounded by empty beer bottles. I crept through the house, gathering the final pieces of evidence. In Mom's office, I found draft press releases for after the gala, plans for a book deal, and a schedule of speaking engagements. She had been planning to monetize our grief for years to come. Morning arrived with Mom's car back in the driveway, and she entered the house as if nothing had happened, humming while she made coffee, but her hands shook as she poured her cup. She announced that we needed to prepare for the gala because the donors were expecting us in 6 hours. I agreed to get ready, and she watched me suspiciously, but she had no choice as canceling now would confirm every doubt that had been raised at the ceremony. I put on the black dress, let her style my hair, and became the prop she needed one last time. The venue was elegant, decorated in Archie's team colors, and donors mingled with champagne glasses, unaware of the storm that was approaching. Mom worked the room with a desperate energy, her smile too bright and her laugh too loud, while Dad followed her mechanically, his eyes dead. But something was wrong. The expected crowd hadn't materialized, and several of the major donors were absent. Those who were present seemed uncomfortable, checking their phones and whispering in corners, and Mom's carefully orchestrated performance was playing to a skeptical audience. Aunt Linda arrived with a small group, the parents from the coffee meeting, Coach Miller, and Sarah's family, and they took a table near the stage, their presence impossible to ignore. Mom's smile flickered but held as she had no choice but to continue. The program began with Mom taking the microphone, speaking about loss, community, and Archie's legacy, but her words rang hollow in the half-empty room. When she mentioned the scholarship fund, someone coughed loudly, and when she talked about healing, chairs scraped against the floor. Then, Aunt Linda stood up, not raising her voice, but simply asking about the cousin from years ago, the one with epilepsy whose treatment money had disappeared. Mom's face went white and she tried to deflect, but Aunt Linda continued, listing dates, amounts, and patterns. Other voices joined in. The former co-workers mentioned financial discrepancies at Mom's previous jobs. Parents asked about the multiple prescriptions from different doctors. And Coach Miller stood up and simply said that Archie had come to him the week before he died, scared and wanting help, but too afraid of disappointing his parents to accept it. Mom's mask finally shattered and she screamed at Aunt Linda, at the crowd, and at me, wild accusations flying from her mouth that we were jealous, vindictive, and trying to profit from her pain. But the room had turned against her, and people were leaving, pulling out their phones, and canceling their donation checks. Dad stepped away from her for the first time and moved to stand with Aunt Linda, his choice clear. Mom stood alone at the microphone, her red dress garish under the stage lights, ranting at an emptying room until security eventually escorted her out, screaming about lawsuits and revenge and how we would all pay. But her power was broken, the money would be returned, the fundraisers would be investigated, and the truth was finally out. I sat at an empty table as the venue cleared, still wearing the black dress she had chosen for me. Sarah and her mom sat with me, their quiet support a comforting presence while I processed everything. Jake and the team stopped by, promising to keep Archie's real memory alive, and Coach Miller squeezed my shoulder before he left. Aunt Linda drove me home, where Dad had already started packing Mom's things, having found more evidence, pills hidden throughout the house, forged prescriptions, and research on dosing for maximum effect without causing immediate fatality. The full scope of her planning was staggering. Mom tried to return twice that night, first begging through the locked door, crying that she was still my mother, that she loved me, and that everything had been for the family. The second time, she brought threats, saying she would take the house, destroy our reputations, and make sure I never forgot what I had done to her. Both times, we didn't answer. Aunt Linda had already started the legal proceedings to become my guardian, and Dad would be moving out, too broken by his own complicity to pretend at parenting. The house would be sold, and the profits would be donated to legitimate athlete safety programs. The next few days blurred together as Mom disappeared after emptying what bank accounts she could still access, and Dad signed legal papers with shaking hands. I packed up Archie's real belongings, not the sanitized versions Mom had curated, but his actual life, his lucky socks with the holes in them, the notes he had passed in class, and the bottle of cologne he had been saving for after he won the state championship. A week later, I stood in the empty house with Aunt Linda. The furniture was gone, either donated or sold, but in Archie's room, I had left one thing, our team photo from his freshman year, before everything went wrong, his smile real in that picture, unmarred by fear or pills or a mother's greed. Sarah's family helped me move my things to Aunt Linda's house, which was smaller than the house blood money had bought, but it felt clean. That first night, I finally slept without nightmares, without wondering what Mom was planning, and without the fear of what the morning would bring. Coach Miller invited me to speak at a team parent meeting about recognizing the signs of prescription abuse in young athletes, and I shared what I could bear to share, watching as parents took notes and seeing them look at their own children with a new level of concern. It wasn't justice, not really, but it was something. 3 months later, I returned to regular school, and the whispers followed me at first, the girl whose parents killed her brother for money, but Sarah, Jake, and the others formed a protective buffer around me, and eventually, I was just another student again. Mom surfaced once, 6 months later, in a letter with no return address, postmarked from another state, blaming me for everything and saying I had destroyed our family out of jealousy, hoping I was happy with the choices I had made. I burned it without showing it to anyone. Dad sent birthday cards and Christmas money, guilty attempts at connection, which I accepted without responding because he had made his choices, enabled her plans, and looked away when looking would have saved Archie. His weakness had been just as deadly as her greed. On the anniversary of Archie's death, I visited his grave with our old team, and we didn't bring flowers because he would have thought that was silly. Instead, we brought a basketball and took turns shooting at a portable hoop someone had set up nearby, each basket a memory, a story, the brother they had actually known. That evening, I sat with Aunt Linda, looking through old photo albums she had saved from when we were young, pictures from before Mom had turned poisonous, when we had just been a normal family, Archie grinning with missing teeth, me on his shoulders at a parade, the two of us covered in cake at someone's birthday party. I kept one photo for myself, of Archie and me at the beach eating ice cream from our favorite parlor, from the day of our tradition, the one I had tried to honor on the day everything changed. His face was sunburned and happy, with a smudge of chocolate sauce on his chin, and I was laughing at something he had said. That's how I chose to remember him, not as a victim of our mother's greed or our father's weakness, not as a cautionary tale about prescription abuse, but just as my brother, who stole my croutons, had a terrible free throw percentage, and gave the best hugs whenever I was sad. The scholarship fund in his name helped 3 kids attend basketball camp that summer, with small funds carefully managed by Coach Miller and a board of parents, and there were no galas or publicity, just quiet help for families who needed it, which Archie would have liked. I graduated 2 years later, and Mom didn't come, obviously, while Dad sent a card. But the stands were full of my chosen family, Aunt Linda crying behind her sunglasses, Sarah's family cheering too loud, Coach Miller looking proud, and Jake and the team whooping when I walked across the stage. My college applications asked about overcoming challenges, and I wrote about learning that family isn't always about blood, that strength sometimes means asking for help, and that justice doesn't always come from the courts. I didn't mention the headlines or the gossip, just the quiet, difficult work of rebuilding after a betrayal. The acceptance letters came with legitimate financial aid based on need and merit, not on tragedy, and I chose a school 6 hours away, far enough for a fresh start but close enough for weekend visits home. Aunt Linda helped me pack, both of us crying as we folded clothes into boxes. My dorm room was small, and I shared it with a girl who had never heard of me or Archie or what had happened, and she complained about her parents being overprotective, calling too much, and sending too many care packages. I told her she was lucky, and I meant it. I kept Archie's team hoodie, now worn to threads, and sometimes I wore it to study in, feeling close to him in the quiet library hours, while other times it stayed folded in my drawer, too painful to touch. Grief wasn't linear. I learned that it came in waves, unexpected and overwhelming. The investigative report concluded a year after I left for college, documenting multiple prescription frauds and confirming a pattern of exploitation. Mom had vanished completely, and the warrants were useless across state lines, while Dad received probation for his cooperation. The money from the house sale funded a permanent athletic safety program in our community. I majored in public health with a focus on adolescent wellness, not because of what happened, as I refused to let her choices dictate mine, but because I had learned how easily systems could fail vulnerable people. My professors didn't know my history. I was just another student, passionate about prevention. During my junior year, I ran into one of Archie's old teammates at a conference, and he had gone into coaching, inspired by Coach Miller's example. We talked about Archie over coffee, sharing funny stories and good memories of the person he had been, beyond the tragedy, and it felt, finally, like healing. Mom sent one final letter during my senior year, longer this time, rambling and full of justifications and accusations. She had remarried, she said, and had started over with someone who understood her, hoping I had learned my lesson about family loyalty. I kept that one as evidence of a narcissism that would never be able to acknowledge the truth. Graduation approached with a bittersweet anticipation, and Aunt Linda planned to come, along with the extended chosen family that had sustained me. I sent Dad an invitation out of a sense of obligation, knowing he wouldn't show, because some bridges simply couldn't be rebuilt. My thesis advisor suggested I consider graduate school, as I had the grades, the passion, and the unique perspective, but I wanted to work first, to help people directly rather than theoretically. A position opened up at a youth athletic program, teaching coaches about health monitoring, and I applied immediately. The interview went well until they asked me about handling difficult parents. I paused, then spoke honestly about understanding how parental pressure could harm young athletes, how sometimes love got twisted into a dangerous form of control, and how important it was to watch for the signs that others might miss. They offered me the job, and I accepted, knowing that Archie would approve. It wasn't the grand gesture Mom would have orchestrated, but quiet, important work, preventing other families from experiencing similar tragedies. I started 2 weeks after graduation, nervous but determined. The first parent who dismissed my concerns about their child's fatigue reminded me of Mom, so certain they knew best and so focused on scholarships and future success that they couldn't see the present harm. I documented everything, followed the protocols, and ensured that other adults were watching. The child eventually got help, and the parents were forced to confront their own pushing. Each small victory felt like I was honoring Archie properly, not through galas or fundraisers or public performances of grief, but through mundane vigilance, watching for shaking hands, rapid heartbeats, and exhausted kids who were afraid to disappoint. I was being the adult who would act when others might look away. 5 years after his death, I returned for a team reunion, and the gym looked smaller than I remembered. Coach Miller had retired but came anyway, grayer but still commanding respect. We gathered under Archie's jersey, sharing stories that had evolved into legends, and someone had brought the old team photo, the one I had left in his room. We recreated it, with gaps where Archie and another teammate, lost to addiction, should have stood. The camera captured us, middle-aged and changed, but still connected by a shared history and loss. That night, I drove past the old house where a new family lived, with bikes in the driveway and different curtains in the windows, and they had planted a garden where Mom had planned to put her pool. I didn't stop. I just witnessed the transformation and drove on. Aunt Linda was waiting up for me with tea and questions about the reunion, and we talked until late, processing how far we had both come. She had been my anchor through everything, proving that family could be chosen and that blood didn't guarantee loyalty, and I had been so lucky to have her when everything else had crumbled. The next morning brought work emails and a return to normal life. I had built something stable from the ruins, a career, relationships, a purpose beyond just survival. Mom's shadow had faded to a manageable size, Dad remained a complicated grief, but Archie stayed present in my choices, in my vigilance, and in my refusal to let others suffer in the same way. Sometimes, donors from the past would recognize my name, connect the dots, and ask questions, and I would answer simply, yes, that was my brother. Yes, it was preventable. Yes, I work now to help other families. No elaboration was needed as the truth stood on its own, without any embellishment. My apartment held few photos, but the ones it did were precious. Archie and me at the beach, the team reunion shot, Aunt Linda at my graduation, and Sarah's wedding, where I had been a bridesmaid. Life had continued, despite everything, and it was fuller, somehow, for having survived the betrayal. Occasionally, usually late at night, I would wonder where Mom was, if she had found new victims or if she had finally faced any consequences, and I wondered if she ever felt genuine remorse or if she remained convinced of her own martyrdom. But mostly, I didn't think of her at all, and that, I realized, felt like the greatest victory. I had learned to mention Archie naturally in conversation, my brother, who played basketball, my brother, who died young, my brother, who made me laugh. I was no longer defining myself by the tragedy but incorporating the loss into a fuller story, as he deserved to be remembered for more than what had killed him. The work continued, watching for the signs, advocating for young athletes, and teaching adults to see beyond their own ambition. They were small acts that might prevent another family's destruction, not redemption, because nothing could restore what had been lost, but it was meaning, carved from meaninglessness. 10 years after that night with the pharmacy receipt, I stood in front of a room of parents, teaching a workshop on prescription abuse in youth sports. They took notes, asked questions, and some of them cried as they recognized familiar patterns. I spoke with a hard-won authority about pressure and pills and the terrible price of willful blindness. Afterward, a mother approached me privately, saying her son had been struggling and the coach had suggested something for focus. She had almost agreed until she attended this workshop, and now she understood the danger. She thanked me with tears in her eyes, clutching my hands. I drove home thinking about Archie, about cycles broken and others prevented, about Mom out there somewhere probably still performing grief for profit, about Dad's weakness and Aunt Linda's strength, and about choosing who deserves your loyalty. That night, I made pasta with extra croutons, setting a place at the table for his memory. I wasn't mourning anymore. I was honoring the brother who had existed before the pills and the plots, the one who deserved the protection we had failed to provide, the one who lived on in every child I helped keep safe. The work would continue tomorrow and all the days after, watching, protecting, remembering, building something worthwhile from the ruins, and proving that love could triumph over greed, even when justice came not from the courts, but from choosing to break the cycles, to save others, and to honor the dead by protecting the living.